I, Emily, 27 years old, sat frozen at our family dinner celebrating my brother Michael's promotion. Dad suddenly stood up, raising his champagne glass, to Michael, who's successful and responsible. Unlike you, he stared directly at me. He actually makes us proud. The table fell silent. Mom looked away uncomfortably while Michael smirked. I fought back tears, humiliation burning through me. They had no idea what this moment would set in motion. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Trust me, you'll want to see how I finally made them recognize exactly who I am. I drove home that night with tears streaming down my face, my knuckles white as I gripped the steering wheel. The headlights of passing cars illuminated my face in brief flashes as memories flooded back. This wasn't just about tonight. This was about a lifetime of being second best. The pattern started when I was just 8 years old. Michael was 10 then, already establishing himself as the golden child. I remember the day he broke Mom's favorite crystal vase, the one her grandmother had given her. When she discovered the shattered pieces, Michael immediately pointed at me. "Emily did it," he said without hesitation. "I saw her playing near it earlier." Despite my protests and tears, I was sent to my room without dinner. Michael got ice cream that night. I could hear him laughing downstairs. That moment set the tone for our entire childhood. Michael, the golden child. Emily, the scapegoat. It didn't matter what I achieved, it was never enough. In high school, I made the honor roll every semester. My parents would nod and say, "That's nice," before turning their attention to Michael's latest baseball game. When I won a statewide art competition, my father asked why I was wasting time drawing instead of focusing on real subjects like Michael. College was where the disparity became impossible to ignore. Dad paid for every cent of Michael's education at a prestigious private university. "He's studying business," Dad would boast to anyone who would listen. "He's going to take over the world someday." Meanwhile, I cobbled together scholarships and worked 3 part-time jobs to put myself through state school for graphic design. Every time I called home exhausted from balancing work and studies, Mom would say, "That's just how life is, Emily. We all have to work hard." All while Michael partied his way through college on Dad's dime. My graduation day should have been special. I was the first person in our family to graduate with honors. But my parents missed the ceremony because Michael had a baseball tournament. "It's a really important game, Emily," Mom had explained over the phone. "You understand, right?" I sat alone at my graduation dinner that night, surrounded by my friends and their proud families. When I landed my first job at a marketing firm, Dad referred to my career as drawing pictures for a living. When Michael got his first job at a finance company through Dad's golf buddy, they threw him a party. "That's my boy," Dad said, slapping him on the back. Following in my footsteps. The COVID pandemic revealed even more about our family dynamics. I was the one who dropped off groceries for my parents every week, who set up their Zoom accounts so they could stay connected, who walked them through getting their vaccines. Michael was too busy with his own life to help. Yet somehow, in family conversations, he was praised for checking in with a text message once a week. When Mom needed surgery last year, guess who took 2 weeks off work to care for her? Not Michael. He sent flowers and called it a day. I cooked, cleaned, administered medication, and drove her to follow-up appointments. Dad thanked me, but in the same breath mentioned how Michael would have helped if he wasn't so busy closing that big deal. The final straw came when I discovered my parents had loaned Michael $50,000 for a down payment on his house. I found out by accident when Mom mentioned it in passing, as if it was common knowledge. When I asked if I could expect similar help when I was ready to buy a home, Dad scoffed. "Emily, you need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. We can't bail you out forever." Stand on my own 2 feet? I'd been doing exactly that since I was 18. All this while I was struggling to make rent on my apartment, but still finding time to help Mrs. Rodriguez, my elderly neighbor, with her groceries and medication. I drove her to church every Sunday and made sure her cat had food when she visited her sister. Basic human decency in my book. But according to my family's standards, I was somehow the irresponsible one. I had been recommended for a promotion at work the week before that fateful dinner. After years of dedication, late nights, and exceptional client feedback, my boss Lisa had called me into her office. "Emily, we want you to lead the new digital marketing division," she'd said. "You've earned this." I was ecstatic. Finally, something to show my family that I was successful in my own right. That dinner was supposed to be my moment to share my good news. Instead, it became yet another celebration of Michael, with a side of Emily isn't good enough. As I pulled into my apartment complex that night after the dinner, I sat in my car for a long moment, engine off, streetlight casting shadows across my face. A clarity washed over me like never before. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked or how much I achieved, they would never see my value. In their eyes, I would always be less than Michael. I was done trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. Something shifted in me that night. The constant need for their approval dissolved, replaced by something colder and more determined. If they couldn't see my worth, perhaps they needed a more dramatic demonstration of exactly who I was. 2 weeks after the dinner disaster, I was sorting through emails on my lunch break when a message from an unfamiliar address caught my attention. The subject line read simply, "Your family isn't what you think." My finger hovered over the delete button. Probably spam. But curiosity got the better of me. The email contained several PDF attachments with no message in the body. Cautiously, I opened the first document. My heart nearly stopped. It was a financial statement from my father's company, Madison and Burke Financial Consultants, where he'd worked as a senior financial advisor for over 20 years. But the statement had unusual transfers highlighted, large sums of money being moved to an entity called Pinnacle Ventures LLC. I opened the second attachment. It was the registration documents for Pinnacle Ventures LLC. The CEO was listed as Michael Anderson, my brother. According to the paperwork, Pinnacle was a business consulting firm established 3 years ago. My father was listed as the company secretary. The third document was the most damning, internal emails between my father and the accounting department at Madison and Burke, showing he had been systematically misdirecting company funds to Pinnacle Ventures under the guise of consultant fees for services that were never rendered. My father was embezzling from his company, and he was using Michael to do it. At first, I couldn't believe it. There had to be some explanation. My father was stern and played favorites, but he wasn't a criminal, was he? I needed to verify this information before jumping to conclusions. I spent the next week investigating quietly. The anonymous email had included enough details that I could independently confirm much of the information. Pinnacle Ventures LLC was indeed registered to Michael at his home address. The company had a bare-bones website that listed vague business consulting services, but no clients, case studies, or evidence of actual work. The breakthrough came when I was helping Mom organize some old photo albums at their house. Dad and Michael were at a baseball game, their sacred bonding time. As I was reaching for a box on the top shelf of Mom's closet, a small container fell. Inside was a thumb drive labeled simply insurance. My heart racing, I pocketed the drive and finished helping Mom. That night, in the privacy of my apartment, I plugged it in. The contents confirmed everything the anonymous email had suggested, and worse. There were spreadsheets detailing the embezzlement going back 3 years, totaling nearly $850,000. There were recorded phone conversations between Dad and Michael discussing how to move the money. There were even contingency plans for what to do if someone at the company started asking questions. The next day, I went back to my parents' house when I knew Mom would be alone. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Dad had humiliated me weeks before. "Mom," I said gently, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." I placed printed copies of some of the documents in front of her. "Do you know about this?" Her face crumpled immediately. No denial. No confusion. Just immediate, overwhelming guilt. She started sobbing, her shoulders shaking. "I'm so sorry, Emily," she whispered. "I found out about a year ago. Your father said it was just temporary, that he was going to pay it all back." She wiped her eyes. "Then he said it was too late to stop, that we'd all go down if anyone found out. Why didn't you report it? Why didn't you tell someone?" Mom looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. He said he would leave me. After 30 years, he said he would walk away, and I'd have nothing. Her voice broke. I don't have my own money, Emily. I don't have a career. What would I do? I felt a mix of pity and frustration. Mom, this is serious. Dad and Michael could go to prison for this. Please, she grabbed my hand desperately. You can't tell anyone. It would destroy our family. Please, Emily. The irony of her concern for our family wasn't lost on me. What made the situation even more complicated was the realization that my father's company, Madison and Burke, was owned by my godfather, Uncle James. He wasn't really my uncle, but my father's college roommate and lifelong friend. Uncle James had always been kind to me, sending birthday cards with generous checks, attending my art shows when my own parents couldn't be bothered. He had treated me with more genuine interest and respect than my own father. And now I discovered my father and brother had been stealing from him for years. I called my law school friend, Samantha, for advice, keeping the details vague enough to protect identities. Her response was clear: this is major fraud. Whoever is being stolen from needs to know, and the authorities need to be involved. There's no middle ground here. I wrestled with my conscience. Despite everything, these were still my family members. But they had committed serious crimes, and my godfather was the victim. What was my moral obligation here? I decided to start small. At Sunday dinner the following weekend, I casually mentioned to my father that I'd been reading about corporate fraud cases. It's amazing how people think they won't get caught, I said, making direct eye contact with him. Digital paper trails are forever these days. The color drained from my father's face. Michael kicked him under the table, but I caught the movement. For the rest of the meal, Dad was uncharacteristically attentive to me, asking about my work, my apartment, even my elderly neighbor. It was the most interest he'd shown in my life in years. 3 days later, he called to invite me to another family dinner. Just to catch up, he said, his voice overly casual. It's been too long since we really talked, Emily. I accepted the invitation with a sugary sweetness that didn't sound like me at all. As I hung up the phone, a cold determination settled in my chest. If they wanted to play games, they had no idea who they were up against. The dutiful, invisible daughter they had dismissed for years was about to show them exactly what she was capable of. The second family dinner was a performance worthy of an Oscar. Dad pulled out my chair, Mom had prepared my favorite meal, and Michael actually asked questions about my work. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed they had suddenly developed genuine interest in my life. So, Emily, Dad said, refilling my wine glass for the third time, I've been thinking about what you said about your apartment. Maybe it is time we helped you get a down payment together for a place of your own. Family should help family, right? Michael nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. In fact, I know a great realtor who could help you find something in my neighborhood. I smiled and thanked them, all while noting how Michael's left eye twitched, his tailwind lying since childhood. They were love-bombing me and doing a terrible job of it. After dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom. As I passed Dad's study, I heard urgent whispers. I paused, straining to hear. She knows something, Michael hissed. I'm telling you, she's acting weird. Keep your voice down, Dad replied. We just need to make sure she doesn't know too much. The Lisa situation will take care of everything else. Lisa? My boss Lisa? I quietly slipped my phone from my pocket, activated the voice recorder, and placed it on the decorative table outside the study door before loudly walking back toward the dining room. Then I returned to the bathroom, flushing the toilet and running the water for authenticity. 20 minutes later, after dessert and coffee, I made another bathroom trip and retrieved my phone. I didn't listen to the recording until I was safely back in my apartment. What I heard turned my blood to ice. Dad and Michael weren't just worried about me discovering their embezzlement. They had a plan to frame my boss, Lisa, for the crime. They had already planted forged documents on her computer and were planning to anonymously tip off Uncle James about accounting irregularities that would lead straight to Lisa. Lisa, who had mentored me for 4 years. Lisa, who had championed my promotion. Lisa, who was a single mother with 2 teenagers. They were going to destroy her life to save themselves. Michael's voice on the recording was particularly chilling. The best part is, I backdated the document creation timestamps. Even their IT forensics won't be able to prove she didn't create them herself. I told you that computer science minor would come in handy someday. They laughed. They actually laughed about ruining an innocent woman's life. Over the next week, I dug deeper. While helping Mom with laundry, I accidentally found her diary hidden in her dresser drawer. The entries painted a disturbing picture of my parents' marriage. Dad had been emotionally abusing Mom for years, controlling all their finances, isolating her from friends who asked too many questions, and threatening to leave her destitute if she ever crossed him. One entry from 6 months ago read, "Robert was so angry about the questions from accounting today. He threw his phone at the wall and told me if I ever mentioned his business arrangements with Michael again, I'd regret it. I'm so afraid of what will happen when this all comes crashing down." I needed to approach Uncle James, but carefully. I called him and asked if we could meet for coffee to discuss some career advice. He agreed enthusiastically. At the coffee shop, I kept the conversation general at first, asking about industry trends and career development. Then I carefully steered toward company operations. "How do you manage to keep track of everything in such a large firm?" I asked innocently. Uncle James sighed. "To be honest, Emily, it's been challenging lately. We've had some accounting discrepancies that I can't quite get to the bottom of. Your father's department, actually." He looked troubled. "I'm sure it's just errors in the system, but it's substantial enough that I've had to bring in external auditors." My stomach clenched. The timeline was accelerating. I needed to move faster. That evening, I discovered something even more alarming. My coworker Jessica had come over to help me organize the evidence I'd gathered. While searching through more of the documents from the thumb drive, we found plans for my father and Michael to leave the country. They had purchased plane tickets to a non-extradition country for 3 weeks from now. Property records showed Dad had quietly put their family home on the market through a discreet listing service. Most shocking of all, there was no ticket for my mother. They were planning to abandon her to deal with the fallout. "Emily, this is serious," Jessica said, her face pale. "They're not just planning a fraud anymore. This is a full-blown escape plan." I nodded, the pieces falling into place. "And they're going to let my boss take the fall and my mom deal with the aftermath." I decided to take a calculated risk. The next time Dad called a family meeting about financial planning, I expressed interest in their investment strategies. Dad was so thrilled by my apparent acceptance that he actually showed me some of their offshore account details. "This is how smart people handle their money, Emily," he said patronizingly. "Not living paycheck to paycheck like you've been doing." I nodded eagerly. I want to learn everything. I feel like I've been so blind all these years. Dad clasped my shoulder. "That's my girl. Finally putting family first." Michael was more suspicious. After Dad left the room, he cornered me. "Why the sudden interest? A month ago you could barely stand to be in the same room with us." I looked him straight in the eye. I realized I've been fighting a losing battle. Dad's never going to see me the way he sees you. So instead of banging my head against that wall, I decided to learn from the best. I gestured toward the office where Dad had gone. "Clearly, you two know something about success that I don't." Michael studied my face for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Well, it's about time. Maybe you're not as hopeless as we thought." That night, as I was invited into their inner circle, I saw the full extent of their moral corruption. They spoke casually about the people they were betraying, the lives they were willing to ruin, all to protect themselves and their stolen money. They talked about Lisa as if she was nothing more than a convenient scapegoat. They mentioned Uncle James with contempt, calling him too trusting and a sucker. And they never once mentioned what would happen to Mom. As I drove home that night, I no longer felt any conflict about what I had to do. This wasn't just about years of favoritism or emotional abuse anymore. This was about stopping genuinely dangerous people who happened to share my DNA. The next morning, I texted Uncle James. "Need to speak with you privately. Very important. Not at your office or my parents' house." We met at a small coffee shop across town, one my father would never visit. Uncle James arrived looking concerned. "Emily, is everything all right? You seemed very serious on the phone." I took a deep breath. Uncle James, before I say anything else, I need to know something. If you discovered someone close to you had betrayed your trust in a serious way, how would you handle it? He looked startled by the question, but considered it carefully. I believe in confronting problems directly. But I also believe in compassion. Why do you ask? I studied his face. The kindness in his eyes had always been genuine. I took a calculated risk and pulled out a folder with some of the less damning evidence. I've discovered something troubling. These are financial records from Madison and Burke. I think you should look at them. As Uncle James reviewed the documents, his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to profound hurt. These are showing systematic fund transfers to Pinnacle Ventures. He looked up sharply. That's Michael's company, isn't it? I nodded. There's more. Much more. But I wanted to show you enough to prove I'm serious without overwhelming you. Uncle James sat back, his face ashen. Your father has been with me for 25 years. I was best man at his wedding. I'm your godfather. His voice cracked slightly. And he's been stealing from the company? With Michael. I'm so sorry, I said sincerely. I know this is a shock. He straightened his shoulders. Thank you for bringing this to me, Emily. This must have been incredibly difficult for you. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I need to see everything you have. I revealed that I had been building a case file. There's something else you should know. They're planning to frame my boss Lisa for the embezzlement. And they're planning to leave the country in 3 weeks. Uncle James's expression hardened. Not if I have anything to say about it. He shared that he'd been about to promote my father to CFO, which would have given him even more access to company funds. The level of betrayal here. He shook his head. Emily, we need to move carefully. If they realize we're investigating, they might accelerate their plans. Our conversation was interrupted by an urgent text from Lisa. Need to see you immediately. My office. Private matter. When I arrived at Lisa's office, she closed the door behind me, her expression grave. Emily, the IT department found something strange on my computer. Financial documents I never created, showing transfers I never authorized. She lowered her voice. They're saying it looks like embezzlement. My heart sank. Michael had already planted the evidence. I took a deep breath and made a decision. Lisa, I need to tell you something, and it's going to sound crazy. I explained everything, the embezzlement, my father and brother's plan to frame her, their escape strategy. Lisa listened in stunned silence. When I finished, she asked, "Do you have proof of this?" I nodded and showed her some of the key documents. She studied them carefully, then looked up with determination in her eyes. We need to clear my name and stop them. I'm in. With Lisa's help, I gained authorized access to the company systems to gather more evidence of the timeline and methods used in the fraud. Uncle James introduced me to Taylor, the head of security at Madison and Burke, who helped us build a comprehensive case while keeping the investigation confidential. Meanwhile, my mother noticed my frequent absences and mysterious meetings. She confronted me one afternoon at her house. Emily, what are you doing? She demanded, her voice shaking. Your father says you've been asking strange questions. Are you investigating him? Mom, I know everything. About the embezzlement, about the plan to leave the country, about Lisa being framed. She collapsed into a chair. You don't understand. Your father will be furious. Mom, he's planning to leave you behind. When everything falls apart, you'll be the one left to face the consequences. Her face went pale. Slowly, she rolled up her sleeve to reveal a pattern of bruises on her arm. It's gotten worse since he started worrying about being caught. Last night, he said if anything goes wrong, he'll make sure I pay for it. My blood ran cold. You need to get somewhere safe. Now. I arranged for Mom to stay with my aunt in a neighboring state, telling Dad and Michael she was helping with a new grandchild. For her safety while we gather evidence, I explained to Uncle James and Lisa. Michael noticed Mom's absence and confronted me after a family dinner. He cornered me in the kitchen, his voice low and threatening. What game are you playing, Emily? Where's Mom really? She's exactly where I said she is, I replied calmly. With Aunt Susan. Michael moved closer, towering over me. If you're messing with family business, you're going to regret it. Dad and I have built something here, and nobody's going to tear it down. Especially not his disappointment of a daughter. In that moment, I saw Michael clearly. He wasn't just Dad's puppet, he was the architect of much of this plan. In some ways, he was more calculating than our father. Through further investigation, I discovered Michael had hidden offshore accounts our father didn't know about. He'd been skimming from the embezzled funds, stealing from the thief who raised him. The apple hadn't fallen far from the tree, but it had rolled a little further downhill. With Taylor's help, I installed tracking software on both Dad's and Michael's phones. I continued attending their planning meetings, taking notes, and recording conversations when possible. With each passing day, they grew more stressed and paranoid, snapping at each other over small details. An unexpected ally emerged in Michael's fiancée, Rebecca. She came to my apartment one evening, eyes red from crying. "I found something on Michael's computer," she said. "Messages to women in Costa Rica. He's planning a life there without me." Rebecca provided access to Michael's personal email, revealing arrangements for a villa in his name only, not our father's. "He's going to betray everyone," she said bitterly. "That's who he really is." With evidence from all these sources, Taylor helped me build a comprehensive case file documenting every aspect of the fraud, the framing attempt, and the escape plan. After reviewing everything, he confirmed we had more than enough for criminal charges. "The question now," Taylor said, "is how far you want to take this." I was contemplating this very question when I made a chilling discovery. While at my parents' house for dinner, I overheard my father on the phone in his study. "If anything goes wrong, we have a contingency. All the evidence can point to Emily instead. She's been asking questions, accessing company files. We can make it look like she was trying to frame Lisa and us out of jealousy and resentment." My blood ran cold. They were planning to frame me as a backup plan. At that moment, my resolve hardened completely. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was survival. Uncle James, Lisa, Taylor, and I had planned to present our evidence to the company board in a closed-door meeting. The date was set, the presentation prepared, and security measures in place to prevent my father or Michael from accessing the building during the meeting. The night before, I returned to my apartment late after finalizing details with Taylor. As I put my key in the lock, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The door was already unlocked, though I distinctly remembered locking it that morning. Cautiously, I pushed the door open. My apartment had been ransacked. Drawers pulled out, furniture overturned, books swept from shelves. Most alarmingly, my laptop was missing from my desk. My hands shaking, I called Taylor, who arrived within 20 minutes with a security team. They checked the apartment for any remaining threats while I tried to assess what had been taken. "The good news," I told Taylor, "is that most of the evidence is backed up on encrypted drives that weren't here." Taylor nodded grimly, holding up his phone. "Building security footage shows someone entering about 3 hours ago." He showed me the screen. The grainy image clearly showed Michael using a key to enter my building. "He must have made a copy of my key somehow," I said, remembering the time I'd left my purse unattended during a family dinner 2 weeks ago. We called an emergency meeting at Lisa's house. Uncle James arrived looking grim. "We need to assume they know we're building a case." As if on cue, my phone rang. It was my father. "Emily," he said, his voice unnaturally calm, "we need to talk. Michael's been acting erratically, and I'm concerned about some accusations he's making. Why don't you come over so we can sort this out as a family?" "What kind of accusations?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "He seems to think you're gathering some sort of evidence against us." "Ridiculous, of course." He paused. "But if you are mixed up in something, Emily, I want you to know I can protect you. Just drop whatever you're doing, and we'll make sure you're taken care of." "I'll think about it, Dad," I said non-committally before hanging up. Moments later, a text from Michael appeared on my phone. "We know about Uncle James and Lisa. Back off now, or everyone you care about gets dragged down with you." Our carefully constructed plan was unraveling. The next morning, Lisa discovered there had been a security breach at her office. Someone had accessed confidential personnel files on the company server. Taylor identified the source of the breach. My father's longtime assistant, Marge, had used her security clearance to access the files. She had been feeding information to my father for weeks. "We can't trust the original plan," Lisa said, pacing her living room. "They're already working to undermine us." She was right. Rumors had begun circulating at the company questioning Lisa's management. Uncle James reported that he was suddenly facing an audit from the board regarding his division's expenses. That afternoon, I returned to my car after meeting with Rebecca to find all 4 tires slashed. A note was tucked under the windshield wiper. "Final warning." The attacks became more personal. Rebecca called to tell me Michael had become physically intimidating at home, throwing things and punching walls. My mother called from my aunt's house in tears. Somehow, my father had discovered where she was staying. "He's been calling nonstop," she sobbed. "He says he'll report me for stealing from him if I don't come home immediately." We had to move her to a hotel under a false name. The systematic assault on my support system continued. Jessica, my coworker who had been helping me, received a call from HR. Somehow, complaints had been filed against her, questioning her work ethic and integrity. The sources of the complaints traced back to clients with connections to my father. I contacted Samantha, my lawyer friend, and filed for a restraining order against both my father and Michael. 2 days later, the request was denied by a judge who, I later discovered, belonged to the same country club as my father. The walls were closing in. Every move we made was countered. Every person who helped me faced consequences. My allies were growing discouraged. Even Taylor advised caution. They have more resources and connections than we anticipated. Michael's psychological warfare intensified. He sent me photos of my daily routine, me getting coffee, meeting with Taylor, visiting Lisa, with timestamps. The message was clear. I was under surveillance. They were always watching. One night, alone in my new temporary apartment, I had moved after the break-in. I hit my lowest point. Perhaps they were too powerful, too connected to be stopped. I had underestimated how deep their corruption ran and how many people they could influence. As I sat in the dark contemplating surrender, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Is this Emily Anderson?" a man's voice asked. "Who is this?" I replied cautiously. "My name is Victor Reyes. I was your father's business partner 15 years ago. I think we should talk." The next morning, I met Victor at a diner outside town. In his 60s, with silver hair and tired eyes, he carried himself with the wariness of someone who had been burned badly. "Your father destroyed my career and my reputation," he explained, stirring his coffee. "We were developing a commercial property together. When the market turned, he falsified documents to make it look like I had misappropriated investor funds. I lost everything, my business, my home, nearly my family." "Why are you coming forward now?" I asked. "I saw your father's name in connection with an upcoming promotion to CFO. The thought of him gaining more power." Victor shook his head. "I've been silent too long. When I started asking around about him, I heard whispers about an investigation. It led me to you." Victor provided documentation of my father's previous fraud, establishing a pattern of behavior going back decades. More importantly, he had connections to financial investigators who weren't linked to my father's network of influence. With this new support, we began forming a different approach. But the pressure was intensifying. Anonymous sources began contacting my design clients, suggesting I was under investigation for fraud. My professional reputation was under attack. I nearly lost my job. If Lisa hadn't intervened, vouching personally for my integrity, I would have been suspended during the investigation of these false claims. The final straw came when my father showed up at my workplace, creating a scene in the lobby. "I'm just trying to help my troubled daughter," he told the receptionist loudly as security escorted him out. "She's been making wild accusations because of her jealousy toward her successful brother." That night, our team gathered at Victor's home outside the city. "We need to regroup," Uncle James said. "They're too connected, too prepared for a direct confrontation." "We need to be smarter," Lisa added. "More strategic." I nodded, the outline of a new plan forming in my mind. "We've been trying to fight them head-on, where they're strongest. We need to change tactics completely." The next day, I stopped attending family dinners. I deleted my social media accounts. I took a personal leave from work. To all appearances, I had given up and retreated. My father left a gloating voicemail. I'm glad you finally came to your senses, Emily. Family conflicts can be so destructive. Let's talk when you're feeling better. Little did he know, my apparent surrender was actually a strategic retreat. I had underestimated how far they would go to protect their secrets, but they had underestimated me too. They thought I was broken. In reality, I was just getting started. 3 months passed with no visible action for me. To my father and Michael, it appeared I had accepted defeat. In reality, I was working harder than ever, just completely off their radar. Operating from a secure location, a small house Victor owned in a neighboring county, I assembled a new team with no previous connections to my family. With the help of a forensic accountant Victor introduced me to, we traced every financial transaction my father and Michael had made over the past 5 years. The picture that emerged was more damning than even I had imagined. The embezzlement from Uncle James's company was just the tip of the iceberg. They had been running similar schemes with other business associates, creating a complex web of fraudulent companies and transactions. Instead of confronting them directly, I created an anonymous whistleblower account and began methodically contacting their business associates with strategic pieces of information. I never revealed the full scope of what I knew, just enough to plant seeds of doubt about specific transactions. Within weeks, Michael's investors started pulling funding from his ventures. Due diligence concerns, they cited. Business associates began requiring additional verification for transactions with my father. The pressure built slowly, invisibly. Uncle James announced an internal investigation at Madison and Burke, citing accounting irregularities. My father was placed on administrative leave, a humiliating development that he couldn't fight without raising more suspicion. The next phase involved the media. I had carefully documented everything and organized it into clear, irrefutable evidence packages. Through Victor's connections, I sent these packages simultaneously to 3 different journalists known for their investigative reporting on financial crimes. The stories broke on the same day across different publications. Madison and Burke Executive Under Investigation read one headline. Father-son financial scheme exposed, declared another. None mentioned me by name or as a source. My father and Michael couldn't identify the source of the leaks or counter them effectively because the information was coming from too many directions at once. Each time they addressed one allegation, 3 more would appear from different angles. Uncle James publicly distanced the company from my father, announcing a full audit and cooperation with authorities. This wasn't just for show. I had provided him with enough evidence to take legitimate action without revealing my involvement. With the public exposure growing, I took the final step and sent a comprehensive evidence package to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. By this point, the case was too public and too well documented for anyone to block it through personal connections. 2 days later, federal agents prevented my father and Michael from boarding a flight to Costa Rica. The news coverage showed them being escorted through the airport in handcuffs, their faces finally showing the fear and desperation they had caused in others. I watched the coverage from Victor's house, feeling not triumph but a complex mix of sadness, relief, and resolve. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about protecting innocent people like Lisa, Uncle James, and my mother from further harm. Speaking of my mother, she filed for divorce the following week, with my financial and emotional support. The divorce filing included evidence of my father's emotional and physical abuse, ensuring she would be protected from him even if he somehow avoided jail time for the fraud. Rebecca came forward with her own testimony about Michael's involvement, detailing conversations she had overheard and documents she had seen. With her cooperation, prosecutors built an even stronger case. Former business associates, employees, and victims began emerging from the shadows, each with their own story of how my father and brother had manipulated, threatened, or defrauded them. The facade of respectability they had maintained for so long crumbled completely. My father, desperate and cornered, attempted to contact me through his lawyer. He wants to negotiate, the lawyer explained during a phone call. He believes you might have influence with some of the witnesses. There's nothing to negotiate, I replied calmly. The truth is finally coming out. That's all I wanted. Michael, true to form, offered to testify against my father in exchange for reduced charges. When my father learned of this final betrayal from his golden child, something in him broke. He became uncooperative even with his own defense team, ranting about ingratitude and betrayal. Throughout this period, I remained in the background, guiding events through proxies and documentation rather than direct confrontation. I used some of the money Victor had helped me recover to anonymously fund a support group for victims of financial and emotional abuse, focusing particularly on family situations like my mother's. Mom began therapy, slowly rebuilding her sense of self after decades of manipulation. Our relationship, damaged by years of her enabling my father's behavior, began a careful healing process. We met weekly for coffee, talking through painful memories and beginning to forge a new, healthier connection. I was so afraid for so long, she told me during one of these meetings. I convinced myself that accepting his behavior was protecting you kids somehow. I was wrong, and I'm so sorry, Emily. 3 months after their arrest, an FBI agent contacted me directly. We need your official testimony to complete our case, she explained. You've provided excellent documentation, but a jury needs to hear from you directly. This meant stepping out of the shadows, publicly acknowledging my role in exposing their crimes. It meant facing my father and Michael in court, enduring their hatred and possible retribution from their remaining allies. I arranged to meet my mother at a neutral location, a park halfway between our homes. We sat on a bench overlooking a small lake, the autumn leaves creating a tapestry of color around us. The FBI wants me to testify, I told her. She took my hand, her fingers thin but stronger than they had been months ago. Are you going to do it? I think I have to. For Uncle James, for Lisa, for all the others they hurt. I paused. For you. For me. She nodded slowly. I'll be there with you. Every day of the trial. She squeezed my hand. I was blind for too long, Emily. I won't look away again. In the days leading up to the trial, I prepared with the prosecutors, reviewing evidence and practicing my testimony. The fear was still there. These men had been willing to destroy lives to protect themselves, but something stronger had taken root in me. A determination to see this through, to stand in my truth regardless of the cost. The night before I was scheduled to testify, I stood in front of my mirror, looking at my reflection. I no longer saw the insecure, approval-seeking daughter who had sat at that family dinner nearly a year ago. I saw someone stronger, clearer, unafraid to speak truth to power, even when that power wore my father's face. The time for hiding was over. Now was the time for truth. The first night in my new apartment, a sun-filled one-bedroom in Brooklyn with a separate studio space for my design work, I sat surrounded by unpacked boxes, feeling simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. After months of living in Natalie's spare room during the divorce proceedings, I finally had a space that was entirely mine. The settlement had provided financial stability without extravagance. After selling the Manhattan apartment and dividing the recovered assets, I had enough to purchase this modest place outright and invest in expanding my design business. Jordan's attempts to hide funds had ironically resulted in my achieving greater financial independence than I might have otherwise negotiated. That first weekend, Natalie helped me paint the living room walls a vibrant teal, a color Jordan would have dismissed as impractical and attention-seeking. We ordered takeout, drank wine from coffee mugs since I hadn't yet unpacked glasses, and laughed until our sides ached. To new beginnings, Natalie toasted, raising her mug. And to the return of the Sophia I've missed for years. The physical space transformation paralleled my internal journey. With each deliberate choice, furniture that reflected my aesthetic rather than Jordan's preferred minimalism, art that inspired rather than impressed, kitchen equipment that supported my rediscovered love of cooking, I reclaimed pieces of identity I'd gradually surrendered during the marriage. My therapist, Dr. Lin, helped navigate the emotional landscape of recovery. During our weekly sessions, we unpacked the patterns that had allowed Jordan's controlling behavior to escalate so gradually I hadn't recognized it. The metaphor of boiling a frog applies to emotional manipulation, she explained during one particularly insightful session. If changes happen slowly enough, We adapt without realizing the danger until we're already cooked. Through therapy, I confronted uncomfortable truths about my own complicity, how childhood patterns had primed me to seek approval, to accommodate others' needs at the expense of my own, to mistake control for care. Recognizing these patterns doesn't mean blaming yourself, Dr. Lin emphasized. It means identifying vulnerabilities so they can't be exploited again. I also joined a support group for people recovering from controlling relationships. The validation of hearing similar experiences from diverse individuals, successful professionals, creative personalities, people of all backgrounds, helped dissolve the shame that had kept me isolated. I thought I was too smart, too independent to be manipulated, shared Marcus, a corporate attorney whose husband had systematically undermined his confidence for years. But emotional manipulation doesn't discriminate based on intelligence or success. Professionally, I channeled recovery energy into reimagining my design business. The studio space I'd leased became Signature Design, a name celebrating both my professional identity and the pivotal role my signature had played in reclaiming my life. I specialized in helping small businesses and entrepreneurs develop authentic visual identities, finding fulfillment in supporting others' dreams rather than just serving corporate clients. Within 6 months, I'd hired 2 part-time assistants and established a client waitlist. The divorce fallout had unexpected professional benefits. Several women from Jordan's firm discreetly sought my services after witnessing how I'd handled the divorce party confrontation. One executive confided, "Anyone who maintains that level of composure while exposing fraud is someone I want designing my brand." Old passions re-entered my life gradually. I resumed weekend hiking trips, first with Natalie, then with a local outdoors group where I formed new friendships. I enrolled in a painting workshop, rediscovering the joy of creating art without commercial purpose. I took cooking classes specializing in Italian cuisine, something I'd always wanted to explore, but Jordan had dismissed as unnecessary since we can just order in. My relationship with my parents deepened through regular video calls and seasonal visits. Mom and Dad came for Thanksgiving, bringing albums containing photos from my childhood and early adulthood, visual reminders of the confident, creative person I'd been before Jordan's influence. "Remember this?" Dad asked, pointing to a college photo of me accepting a design award, beaming with pride. "That's who you've always been, not who he tried to make you." The process wasn't linear. Some days brought crushing grief over wasted years and betrayed trust. Other days, residual fear surfaced. Had I made financial mistakes? Was I truly capable of independent success? Was I foolish to trust again? Dr. Lin assured me these doubts were normal aftershocks of prolonged emotional manipulation. "Healing isn't about never feeling pain or fear," she explained. "It's about recognizing these emotions without letting them dictate your choices." 1 year after the divorce finalized, I received a letter from Jordan, his first direct communication since court proceedings concluded. His firm had ultimately terminated his employment following their investigation. He'd relocated to Chicago, started at a smaller company, and claimed to be reflecting on past mistakes. The letter contained what superficially resembled an apology. "I realize now my actions hurt you, and I wasn't my best self in our relationship." But careful reading revealed persistent deflection, pressures you couldn't understand, and communication failures on both sides. He closed by asking for closure conversations to facilitate mutual healing. After careful consideration and discussion with Dr. Lin, I chose not to respond. Jordan's letter sought absolution without demonstrating genuine understanding of the harm caused. My healing didn't require his participation or approval. Instead, I channeled that energy into organizing a workshop for a women's business alliance on recognizing financial control in relationships. Using my own experience as a teaching tool transformed personal pain into collective wisdom. 18 months post-divorce, an unexpected connection emerged from a professional consultation. Mark Donovan, a corporate attorney Brian had introduced during my legal proceedings, contacted me about designing materials for his new private practice focusing on supporting entrepreneurs. Our initial coffee meeting extended 3 hours as conversation flowed beyond professional parameters into shared interests in architecture, jazz, and community advocacy. A business relationship evolved into friendship, then cautious dating after 6 months of getting to know each other. Unlike the whirlwind romance with Jordan, my relationship with Mark developed deliberately, with clear communication and mutual respect for independence. When anxieties from past experiences surfaced, I addressed them directly rather than suppressing concerns. I need financial transparency, I told Mark during a conversation about potential vacation plans. Separate accounts are fine, but hidden finances are an absolute deal-breaker for me. Instead of defensiveness, Mark responded with understanding. Given your experience, that makes complete sense. What would make you feel most comfortable moving forward? This pattern repeated across various domains, expressing needs, being heard, finding solutions together rather than capitulating to maintain peace. The relationship felt like partnership rather than performance, collaboration rather than compliance. 2 years after the divorce party, I hosted my own gathering at Signature Design Studio, celebrating the company's expansion and my personal milestone of complete emotional and financial independence. Surrounded by new friends, supportive family, and valued clients, I offered a toast. 2 years ago, I was about to face the most painful public humiliation imaginable, I acknowledged openly. What I didn't know then was that hitting rock bottom would reveal foundations I couldn't see before, resilience, courage, and an identity that couldn't actually be erased by someone else's manipulation. I raised my glass to signatures, the marks we make that define who we truly are. The journey from manipulation to freedom had been painful, but standing in my own space, surrounded by connections formed in authenticity rather than performance, I recognized the profound gift hidden within Jordan's betrayal. By attempting to erase me completely, he had inadvertently forced me to reclaim myself entirely. My signature, with its distinctive flourish representing endless creativity, now appeared not just on legal documents and design contracts, but metaphorically across every aspect of my reclaimed life. Each day represented another opportunity to sign my name to authentic choices, relationships, and a future designed by my own hand. Have you ever had a moment when something that seemed like your greatest defeat actually became your path to freedom? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience, and share with someone who might need to be reminded of their own signature strength. Thank you for witnessing my story, and remember, sometimes what seems like an ending is actually the first page of a much better chapter.